There are things you expect to inherit from your family, maybe a recipe, an old ring, a forehead wrinkle you hate. But never in my wildest dreams did I imagine I'd inherit a secret. A secret that would twist everything I thought I knew, about my parents, my past, and the very business I built from the ground up. A secret so deeply buried that unearthing it didn't just shift my perspective. It detonated my life. My name is Lillian Knox, and this is how one unlocked drawer turned my world upside down, and built something stronger in its place. But first, if you're new here and believe in the power of truth, transformation, and stories that shake your soul, kindly subscribe to our channel. It truly helps us grow and reach more people who need to hear these journeys. Thank you. Now back to the day it all began. It started like any other ordinary Monday. I was in my office, 5th floor, exposed brick, glass doors, the scent of overpriced espresso lingering in the air, reviewing marketing projections for our upcoming launch. Knox & Clear, my skincare brand, was preparing to roll out its biggest anti-aging serum yet, and I was practically vibrating with nerves and excitement. My assistant, Leah, knocked gently on the door. "Your mom's here. Says it's urgent." I blinked. My mom? Rare. Concerning. Alarming, even. Not because we were estranged. Just, not close. She was always emotionally reserved, tight-lipped, as my therapist put it. Supportive, but in the quiet, obligatory way. We didn't do surprise visits. I nodded. "Send her in." She walked in wearing her familiar perfume, jasmine and restraint, and clutched a brown leather folder against her chest like it might bite her. "Mom." I stood. "What's going on?" She sat without answering. Her hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside, faded documents, black and white photos, a yellowed envelope sealed in wax. And then she said it, words that instantly changed everything. "I think it's time you knew who you really are." Let me rewind. I was raised in a middle-class suburb. 2 parents, 1 golden retriever, lots of casseroles. There was never chaos. But also, never warmth. My dad ran a hardware store. My mom taught literature. I was the overachiever, student council, valedictorian, full ride to Stanford. They always supported me, but from a distance, as if parenting was a job they were contractually obligated to complete. It made sense at the time. Until she handed me that folder. And I saw the birth certificate. Not mine. My real one. Name, Lillian Rose Bingham. Birth mother, Rebecca Bingham. Date, April 17, 1993. "What is this?" I asked, voice thin. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "We adopted you." Quietly. "Your mother, Rebecca, was a family friend. She passed away when you were 3. We didn't tell you because we thought it would protect you." "Protect me from what?" I whispered. "From her legacy," she said. "From who she was." That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wax-sealed envelope. Inside, a letter. From Rebecca. Dated 2 months before her death. It read, "Lily, if you ever find this, it means you're strong enough now to know. I was many things, wild, reckless, stubborn. But one thing I never was afraid to build. I built something. Something for you. And I hope someday, it finds you the way I couldn't." My hands trembled. There was a set of coordinates written at the bottom. Handwritten. Meticulous. Deliberate. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't talking about love. She was talking about something physical. Something buried. 2 days later, I booked a flight to Montana. The coordinates led to a rural plot in Bitterroot Valley, lush, green, and completely deserted. It took 2 hours to find the overgrown trailhead, and another hour of hiking before I reached a rundown shack tucked into the woods. Old. Weather-worn. Padlocked. I broke it open with a crowbar borrowed from a nearby ranger station. Inside? Stacks of boxes labeled Bingham Botanicals. Glass bottles. Formulas. Journals. Dried herbs. Letters from suppliers. Notes on anti-aging compounds. Diagrams. Patent sketches. Early product prototypes. It was an abandoned skincare startup. One that mirrored mine in horrifying accuracy. I dropped to the floor. My company, Knox & Clear, wasn't built from scratch. It was built from memory. Buried ones. Inherited instincts. DNA. I called Leah from the motel that night. Did you ever come across the name Bingham Botanicals when we were researching our brand IP? There was a pause. Hold on, give me a sec. 15 minutes later, she called back. Okay, this is weird. There was a brand by that name. Registered in 1991. But it dissolved in 96. No major trademarks. No marketing. No digital footprint. My blood ran cold. Why? The founder died. Young. Cancer. The business was quietly shut down. Nobody picked it up. Nobody, except me. I couldn't sleep that night. My whole identity, self-made woman, entrepreneur, legacy builder, felt like a cosmic echo of someone else's blueprint. And yet, I hadn't stolen it. I'd inherited it. Not just her name. Her instincts. Her formulas. Her fire. Was that theft? Or destiny? And what did I owe her now? When I returned home, I didn't tell my parents everything. Not yet. Instead, I buried myself in the journal entries. Rebecca wasn't just passionate, she was brilliant. Her notes on plant compounds were years ahead of the curve. She wrote like a chemist and a poet. One entry shattered me. I don't know if Lily will ever see this. But I hope one day if she grows anything at all, she'll know her roots are not weakness. They're where the wild things bloom. I cried for hours. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood something no spreadsheet, no investor pitch, no company launch had ever given me. I was not alone in this. My drive, my instincts, my relentless pursuit of excellence, they came from her. A woman I never met, and yet knew completely. By the end of that week, I made a decision that would reshape my entire brand, and my legacy. I would rebrand Knox and Clear to include my birth mother's forgotten name. It would become Bingham Knox Botanicals. I would tell her story, give her the credit, revive her formulations, and build something with her instead of unknowingly on top of her grave. Not everyone understood. My marketing team panicked. Investors raised eyebrows. But I didn't flinch. Because this time, it wasn't just my business. It was my truth. The press release went live at 10 a.m. sharp. Knox and Clear rebrands as Bingham Knox Botanicals, honoring forgotten skincare innovator. By 10:02, my inbox exploded. Investors, journalists, competitors, some curious, some skeptical, most blindsided. And I didn't blame them. After all, no one knew who Rebecca Bingham was. Until now. Are you sure about this? My PR director asked again during our 5th emergency Zoom of the day. We've spent years building equity in Knox and Clear. Rebranding now, it's a risk. I nodded. Calm. Clear. It's not a rebrand, I said. It's a reclamation. She sighed. It's also going to raise questions. About you. About her. About where this came from. I hope it does. She blinked. Because I'm finally ready to tell the truth. The article in Entrepreneur Weekly ran the following week. Headline: From Foundling to Founder, Lillian Knox reveals shocking family history behind new brand. I'd given them an exclusive interview, spoke openly about finding out I was adopted, about Rebecca's abandoned formulas, about my decision to continue her work rather than erase it. It wasn't just PR. It was confession. It was healing. And people responded in a way I didn't expect. I received hundreds of letters. Not emails. Not DMs. Letters. Women who said things like, "My mother died before I knew who she really was. Your story gave me hope that part of her still lives in me. My daughter was adopted. One day she may go looking, and now I know how to show up. I've been scared to change my business name because it was built on a lie. You gave me courage." I cried. Again. Because suddenly, the business wasn't just profitable. It was meaningful. And that made all the difference. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. 2 days after the article went viral, my adoptive father called. "You're airing family history like it's content," he said, voice hard. I expected that. My father had always been more comfortable with hammers than heart-to-hearts. "I'm honoring a woman who was erased," I said quietly. "You're shaming the ones who raised you." "No," I replied. "I'm just adding the part of the story that was left out." He hung up. I didn't cry that time. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't editing myself to stay likable. I was living honestly. The following month, we launched our first heritage line, the Rebecca Collection. 5 original formulas from her journals, modernized with updated testing and packaging. The labels bore her name. The website featured a tribute video, using what little photos I had from the old boxes. There she was, Rebecca Bingham, laughing on a rooftop, stirring a beaker, holding a toddler I realized must have been me. We sold out in 2 hours. Leah came into my office that evening, holding a crumpled envelope. "This came by courier." I took it. No return address. Old stationery. Inside was a letter, neatly typed, and a name that made my stomach lurch. Elliot Carver. The former supplier listed in Rebecca's notebooks. The man she'd scribbled angry margins about. I remembered one line in particular. "Never trust Carver. If something happens to me, check the second ledger." His letter read, "Lillian, I saw your press coverage. Congratulations. I didn't expect Rebecca's formulas to resurface after all this time. She was brilliant, if not paranoid. If you ever want to talk about what really happened with her business, I suggest you meet me. Discreetly. There are things you don't know, and people who wouldn't want you to find out. I'm in Austin. If you're serious, you'll find me." He didn't leave a number. Just an address. I stared at the paper for a long time. Elliot Carver. My mother hadn't trusted him. But she also hadn't burned his notebooks. Maybe that meant something. Maybe that meant everything. The next morning, I booked a flight to Austin. The address led me to a 1-story brick building tucked behind a flower shop. The glass read, "Carver Naturals, R&D Division." A woman greeted me at the front desk and, after checking a calendar, led me down a hallway lined with plants and diagrams of botanical structures. "Mr. Carver's expecting you." I entered a dim, earthy-smelling office. At the desk sat a man in his 60s, bald, with sharp eyes and a faint smile. "Ms. Knox," he said, standing. "Or should I say, Bingham?" "I'll answer to both," I said, shaking his hand. He gestured for me to sit. Then, he pulled a thin black folder from a drawer. "What I'm about to show you never made it into public records," he said. "Because it was destroyed?" "No," he replied. "Because it was buried." Inside the folder were lab reports, tests, approvals, supplier invoices. But more than that, there were letters. Signed affidavits. One from a former partner accusing another company of stealing Rebecca's intellectual property after her death. Another from a lab technician stating that her original compound was later used by a brand now worth hundreds of millions. And one letter from Rebecca herself, never mailed, addressed to the FDA, alleging sabotage by a competitor during a trial period. "She tried to fight them," Carver said, voice low. "But she got sick. Fast. And by the time anyone cared, her name was gone. Her work, her vision, it was folded into bigger brands, rebranded under men's names, erased." I stared at the documents. The rage that had been simmering all year finally boiled. "They stole her work." He nodded. "And yours too, indirectly. You rebuilt what they thought they killed. Without even knowing it." I clenched my jaw. "This has to come out." He met my eyes. "It will ruin people." I smiled coldly. "Good." Back in LA, I met with my legal team. We had the lab reports authenticated, the letters vetted, the names redacted until the right moment. And then, I filed a lawsuit. Not for money, but for justice. To demand acknowledgement. To return Rebecca Bingham's name to the narrative. And to remind the industry that genius doesn't die just because it's inconvenient. Of course, the media had a field day. Headlines screamed. Founder files lawsuit over stolen skincare legacy. The woman they tried to erase is back, through her daughter. Knox versus Titans, the botanical battle you didn't see coming. Suddenly, Bingham Knox Botanicals was a household name. Sales soared. But more importantly, awareness exploded. Rebecca's story became a case study in branding classes. Her formulas were featured in Scientific Beauty Monthly. And at the Women in Business Summit that year, I delivered a keynote titled, "Truth is the Most Valuable Ingredient." That night, I visited my adoptive mother. She didn't say much. Just handed me an old photo album she'd kept in a shoebox. Inside, photos of Rebecca and me. Smiling. Blurry. Real. "She gave you up to protect you," she said, teary-eyed. "I know," I whispered. "And we kept her from you to do the same. But now I wonder, maybe we shouldn't have." I touched her hand. "You did what you thought was best." And I meant it. Forgiveness, it turns out, doesn't require forgetting. It just asks you to stop bleeding for someone else's cuts. The lawsuit didn't just ruffle feathers. It ripped wings off entire corporations. I had filed it not for compensation, but for recognition, a public acknowledgement that Rebecca Bingham's formulas had been stolen, rebranded, and monetized by people who erased her from history. Within a week, subpoenas went out. Within a month, the media frenzy was deafening. But in the quiet moments, in the spaces between interviews, courtroom preparation, and brand meetings, what surprised me most wasn't the backlash. It was the support. Hundreds of letters, emails, voice notes, scientists, entrepreneurs, daughters, all saying the same thing. They tried to bury us too. The first court hearing was scheduled for February 2nd. On the morning of, I stood in front of the mirror adjusting my navy pantsuit, my hands trembling despite my composed reflection. I wasn't afraid of losing the case. I was afraid of facing what had been stolen. Not just products, but time, opportunity, identity. Before I left, I pulled a faded photo of Rebecca from my drawer. She was smiling on a wooden deck, holding a jar of cream like it was the Holy Grail. "Let's get your name back," I whispered, and slipped it into my purse. The courtroom was packed. The opposing counsel represented one of the largest skincare conglomerates in the world, Orinthia Labs. A name polished enough to sound harmless, but beneath it lay a network of buyouts and silenced lawsuits. Their lead attorney, Monroe Whitaker, looked like a villain out of Central Casting, slicked back hair, smirk surgically attached to his face. "Your Honor," he began smoothly, "this is nothing more than a sentimental attempt to rewrite history with emotion, not evidence." I stood slowly when it was my turn. "I'm not rewriting anything," I said. "I'm restoring what was erased." The trial wasn't about a single formula. It was about patterns. We presented patent comparisons. Rebecca's early work aligned near identically with a now famous line Orinthia launched 3 years after her death. Emails surfaced. Internal memos. Old lab notes with her initials, RB, scribbled in margins, then crossed out. One witness, a retired chemist, broke down on the stand. They told me to delete the attribution files. Said it was for streamlining. I didn't know she had passed. I thought she'd been paid. She hadn't. They never even asked. Public opinion swung fast. Headlines changed tone. Whistleblowers back Bingham's legacy. Orinthia faces scrutiny over erased female founders. Can a dead woman win a case? Yes. Yes, she could. Because I wasn't just her daughter. I was her voice now. But then came the threats. Anonymous emails. A car parked outside my house for 3 nights straight. My social media hacked and wiped. Even Leah got a call from an anonymous recruiter, offering her double her salary, if she left me. She didn't. Because loyalty, unlike branding, can't be bought. Still, the fear was real. I doubled security. Hired a digital forensics expert. And yet, through it all, I refused to back down. I told my team, they erased her once. They don't get to do it again. Meanwhile, Lillian Knox botanicals exploded. Not just because of the press. Because people believed in something real. We weren't just selling skincare. We were selling restoration. We launched a podcast titled Buried Genius, featuring stories of other women whose innovations had been silenced. A museum exhibit in New York opened, The Forgotten Women of Chemistry. Rebecca's journals were displayed in glass cases. I stood before them at the opening, stunned. The The formulas that had once been scribbled in isolation were now immortalized in ink and spotlight. And just above the display, a single quote glowed in backlit gold. She wasn't invisible. She was buried. And she grew. The trial continued for 6 grueling months. They dragged out the discovery process, tried to discredit my DNA test, dug into my past, every business loan, every failed product, every breakup. They even subpoenaed my adoption file. But here's the thing about digging too deep. Sometimes you unearth things you don't want the world to see. Like how Orinthia's head of development once interned for Rebecca Bingham in 1994. Or that 2 months after Rebecca's death, he filed 3 patents using her exact lab codes. And that, months later, his bonus tripled. We didn't just have a case. We had a scandal. The judge's ruling came in September. I stood in that courtroom clutching the worn edges of Rebecca's photo in my palm. The judge adjusted his glasses, eyes scanning the chamber. This case represents more than intellectual property. It represents how easily voices, particularly those of pioneering women, can be lost beneath bureaucracy and bias. He paused. I find in favor of the plaintiff. The court recognizes the contributions of the late Rebecca Bingham as foundational to the disputed formulations. Damages are awarded. An addendum will require Orinthia to publicly acknowledge her role in product development, retroactively. I exhaled so hard, my knees almost gave out. We had won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a funeral finally given the ceremony it deserved. Outside, reporters swarmed. Leah held my hand as we walked past them. I gave one brief statement. She was never trying to be famous. She just wanted to be seen. That night, I lit a candle for Rebecca. Not in grief, but in gratitude. I thought about what she'd written in one of her final journal entries. If they remember my name, let it be because my daughter made it impossible to forget. I poured a glass of wine, sat in my office, and wrote the next product brief, Legacy Serum, with her name beside mine. Not under, beside. But just when I thought the story was finally over, I got a knock on my door. It was late. A courier. He handed me a small box with a return address I didn't recognize. Inside? A vintage VHS tape. A letter. From someone who claimed to have worked with Rebecca's birth family. It read, Lillian, if you think you've uncovered everything, you haven't. Rebecca's legacy runs deeper than formulas. Her work, her mission, was much bigger than skincare. You'll want to see what's on this tape. But be careful who you show it to. My heart stuttered. Because up until that moment, I thought the war was won. Now it seemed. It was only just beginning. The VHS tape stared back at me from the kitchen counter like a relic from another world. I hadn't seen one in decades. Who even still owns a VCR? I muttered, holding the cassette in my hand, heart thudding. Leah found one the next day, an old dual player from a resale shop near Silver Lake. We plugged it in, held our breath, and slid the tape into the deck. The screen flickered, buzzed, then steadied. A woman appeared. Not Rebecca. Someone older. Sharper. Her face vaguely familiar. Then, if you're watching this, it means Rebecca's work is no longer safe. I froze. The woman spoke directly to the camera, seated at a lab bench surrounded by jars and medical files. She developed something. A compound. It was never just about skincare, it was cellular. Regenerative. Ahead of its time. She paused. I helped her test it. I helped her hide it. Because the company funding her wanted more than she was willing to give. They wanted ownership. And when she refused, she got sick. The screen hissed for a moment. Then a new face appeared, Rebecca. Thinner. Paler than in the pictures I had. I don't know how long I have, she whispered, clutching a notebook. But if Lillian ever finds this, baby, I'm sorry I left you with so many lies. I inhaled sharply. I didn't want you to spend your life trying to fix what they broke. But I see now, you were meant to. You were born to finish this. She held up a vial. This is everything they wanted. She coughed hard, then leaned closer. And now it's yours. The screen went black. My hands trembled as I hit eject. I didn't speak for minutes. Neither did Leah. Because in those few minutes, everything changed. The next day, I met with my head of R&D, Dr. Madsen. He ran a spectral analysis on the vial I'd found in the original safe. Its compound mirrored our regenerative serum, except far stronger. Too strong. It's borderline experimental, he said, stunned. If this had gone to market in the 90s, it would have rewritten skincare science. Possibly pharma too. I nodded slowly. And it's missing the stabilizer formula. Of course it was. The core remained incomplete. The rest, apparently, had died with Rebecca. Or so I thought. That week, I returned to the last address listed on the courier box, a P.O. box in Napa Valley. I found nothing but wine brochures and silence. Until I spotted a name at a nearby clinic. Dr. A. Wendell. It matched the signature on the VHS label. The receptionist gave me nothing, citing patient confidentiality. So I waited. 3 hours. Eventually, a small gray-haired woman with piercing eyes stepped out and paused when she saw me. Lillian. I stood. You knew her? She nodded. Come. Not here. She led me to a nearby park. Quiet. Windy. She trusted me. With her research. With her fears. She knew they'd come for it. She just didn't know how fast. I swallowed. And the stabilizer? Dr. Wendell opened her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. I've kept it locked for 24 years. She handed it to me. It belongs to you now. I opened it and froze. Not just formulas. Blueprints. Clinical data. Immunotherapy studies. Rebecca hadn't just been developing skincare. She'd been experimenting with topical immune boosters, applications that could, in theory, stimulate cellular healing from the surface in. This isn't beauty, I whispered. It's biotech. Dr. Wendell nodded. That's why they wanted it. And why they still do. When I returned to LA, I initiated a full lab review. I brought in an ethics consultant. Then a bio-patent attorney. And finally, I did what I never thought I would. I scheduled a meeting with Orinthia's current CEO. Not Whitaker. Not the legal pit bull. Eden Vaughn. A woman rumored to clean up legacies with precision and silence. We met in a rooftop garden in downtown. She was already seated when I arrived. Calm. Sharp. Unapologetically in control. You've made quite a mess, she said without greeting. I'm just starting, I replied. She smirked. You filed your case. You got your win. What do you want now, Ms. Knox? I placed the folder between us. I want a joint fund. A public lab under my mother's name. I want her patent restored, her name listed in every publication where her research was erased. Vaughn leaned forward. And if I say no? I smiled. I leak this folder, the tape, and the full untested compound to every major bioethics journal in the country. Let the world decide how much of your legacy is built on stolen dreams. She said nothing. Just stared. Then, finally, you're dangerous. I learned from the best. 2 weeks later, the Bingham Initiative was announced. A $15 million public research collaboration between Bingham Knox Botanicals, 3 universities, and publicly surprisingly, Orinthia Labs. The press called it the boldest legacy restoration in biotech history. But I didn't care about headlines anymore. I cared about truth. And what truth could do when set free. In the midst of all of this, I visited the one person I hadn't yet faced. My birth father. I'd found his name buried deep in Rebecca's journals, Graham Leary. A botanist. A recluse. And a man who had apparently refused to take custody after her death. He lived in an off-grid cabin outside Ojai. When I arrived, he opened the door before I knocked. I figured it was a matter of time, he said. He looked like me. Or maybe I looked like him. We sat in silence for a long time, then he said. She made me promise never to tell you. Why? Because I didn't fight hard enough. I looked around the cabin. No photos. Just plants. She forgave you, I said finally. She shouldn't have. But she did. He stared at the floor, then finally pulled a box from under a bench. She wanted you to have this. Inside, a necklace, a pressed flower, and a sealed envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Rebecca's handwriting. One line. You always had the strength. I just needed to light the path. I cried. For the last time. Not from grief, but from knowing. Knowing that what had started as a business had become a legacy. Not hers. Ours. I used to think legacy meant name recognition. Now, I know better. Legacy is impact, measured not by applause, but by the doors it opens for others when you're gone. The Bingham Initiative had launched barely 2 months ago, and already we were inundated. Grants. Partnerships. Letters from schools, clinics, and international researchers. And something else. Jealousy. Because for every door we opened, someone tried to shut another. It started with a break-in. Not at my house. At our new lab in Pasadena. Nothing was stolen. But something was copied. A series of research logs and temperature-controlled compound vials. The cameras were conveniently wiped, except for a single blurry frame of someone in a lab coat wearing a hood. Leah was the first to speak what we were all thinking. Someone's trying to beat us to market with the rest of her formula. And not just someone. Someone who knew exactly what to look for. I went into overdrive. Security. Encryption. Legal protections. But something kept tugging at me, something deeper. Rebecca's final note. You had the strength. I just needed to light the path. What path? We'd restored her name. Built her lab. Publicized her work. What more was there? Until I remembered, the second folder. The one Dr. Wendell said had been sealed for future collaboration. A long-shot program Rebecca never got funding for. I pulled it out of the vault that night. Inside? A proposal titled, Project EOS, Epigenetic Opportunity Serum. I blinked. Then read it again. Not skincare. Not cancer research. Memory enhancement. A topical formula designed to reactivate dormant memory circuits, potentially helping patients with neurodegenerative disease, trauma, or amnesia. Rebecca hadn't just been healing the skin. She'd been trying to restore the mind. And someone had buried it. Someone very powerful. The next day, a cease and desist letter landed on my desk from a private biotech entity called Alicer Genetics. The letter accused us of infringing on pre-existing intellectual property relating to cognitive topical innovation. It was laughable, until I dug deeper. Alicer had no active products. No publications. No staff listed publicly. But they had investors. And one name caught my eye. Vaughan. As in Eden Vaughan. The same CEO I had just brokered peace with. I demanded a meeting. This time, she didn't send a lawyer. She met me at the same rooftop garden, but the smile was gone. You're digging in places you were never meant to uncover, she said flatly. You partnered with us, I snapped. And now you're setting up a shadow company to claim the rest of my mother's work? You don't understand what you're handling. Then educate me. She leaned in, eyes steely. Project EOS wasn't shelved. It was seized. In 2000. By a government private sector initiative. We all signed NDAs. So did your mother. I stared at her. She was dying. She still signed. I felt something cold twist in my stomach. So that's what this is about? You own her silence. No, she said. I protect it. I left before I said something I'd regret. Back at HQ, I convened my board. We had a choice. Pursue the EOS compound, challenge the NDA through Rebecca's estate, and risk our entire brand. Or, leave it. Focus on the initiative. Play the long game. The board voted 4-2 to shelve it. But I overruled them. Because I wasn't here to play the long game. I was here to finish my mother's. We filed an injunction to release Rebecca's research archive from government storage. Media caught wind. The narrative flipped fast. Daughter of silenced scientist takes on government-backed biotech dealings. They called me arrogant. Reckless. But the public sided with us. Why? Because truth has gravity. And once it starts falling, it drags everything with it. Then came the invitation. A conference in Geneva. Private. Elite. Biotech innovators only. I was stunned to be invited, until I saw the lineup. Half the panel had ghostwritten patents tied to old Orinthia subsidiaries. The topic? Ethics of inherited innovation. I laughed out loud. I flew out with Leah. When I stood on that stage, I didn't talk about products. I talked about people. About how women like Rebecca weren't exceptions. They were everywhere. Erased. Ignored. Brilliant. I ended with this. You can steal a formula, but you can't replicate a legacy that was earned with truth. The room went quiet. Then, applause. One man stood. A Turkish neurochemist named Dr. Altan Özdemir. I have a copy of the EOS logs, he said. My breath caught. My lab ran parallel trials in '99. We were shut down too. But I saved them. 2 weeks later, we had the missing compounds. And with them, enough data to file an international provisional patent. It was aggressive. Risky. But it worked. Because now, the legacy was undeniable. Eden Vaughan never contacted me again. But she didn't need to. Because she wasn't the problem anymore. The real threat? Time. We had a year to prove efficacy. One trial. One shot. So I did something I never thought I would. I volunteered as patient zero. Not for trauma. Not for disease. But for a memory long buried. A voice I couldn't hear since I was 6 years old. My mother's. The serum stung. 4 hours, nothing happened. Then one night, I dreamed of lavender. The scent. The field. Her voice calling my name. Lillian. Not a whisper. A presence. I woke up sobbing. Not because I missed her. But because for the first time, I remembered her exactly as she was. Alive. Brilliant. Mine. The lavender field from my dream didn't leave me. It lingered for days, scent, color, even texture, as if it had been embedded in my senses, pulled from a memory I didn't even know I had. I kept reliving it. The way her voice said my name. The smile in her eyes. I knew it was just a dream, some cocktail of the EOS serum and my brain's desperate wish to reconnect, but still, it felt real. Too real to ignore. So I went back. To the old field behind the duplex in Ojai. The one Rebecca used to write about in her journals. The soil was dry. The stalks gone. But I stood there for hours, letting the wind carry whatever it needed to. And I whispered, I'm not afraid anymore. Because I wasn't. Not of losing the legacy. Not of being misunderstood. And not of the truth. EOS trials moved faster than we expected. We focused on one group, early-stage Alzheimer's patients under 65. 12 subjects. Topical application, daily journaling, and neural scans twice a week. By week 3, 5 of them had shown improvement. Not just stabilization. Recollection. One woman remembered her husband's birthday. Another began painting again, for the first time in 5 years. It wasn't a cure. But it was hope. And for so many who had been told there's nothing left, hope was more powerful than any serum. We weren't just selling skincare anymore. We were reshaping memory itself. Of course, not everyone liked that. After the Geneva patent, Orinthia's stock plummeted. Their board ousted Vaughan. Rumors circulated of a private buyout from an East Asian conglomerate. But I didn't gloat. Because while they crumbled, we expanded. We launched 2 public research labs under the Bingham Initiative, one in San Diego, one in Accra. Both focused on accessible neurotherapy. For once, our brand wasn't a buzzword. It was a bridge. But even with all the success, something still lingered. A question. Not about the past, but about the future. Was I done? Was there anything left to uncover? Until the day Leah came rushing into my office with a thick yellow envelope. I think you need to see this. It was from a probate office in Marin County. Apparently, a storage unit under Rebecca's name had been discovered, paid anonymously for 26 years, and now finally released to her legal heir. Inside? A single journal. One I'd never seen. And inside it, a final entry. To the daughter I hoped would someday forgive me. I never wanted you to carry this burden. But I see now, it was never a burden. It was your calling. If you're reading this, you've done what I couldn't. You've finished the work. You've made me proud in ways I can't even write. But don't stop here. There's more to build. There are others waiting. Light their path the way I tried to light yours. And remember, Lillian, your story is not mine. It's bigger. It always was. I closed the book, stunned. Not because of what she said, but because, for the first time in my life, I believed her. Months passed. Then a year. EOS passed its first round of international trials and was approved for expanded research across 4 continents. And on the anniversary of Rebecca's death, we held the first Bingham Global Symposium, inviting women scientists from 40 countries to share their ideas without fear of erasure. I walked on stage as keynote speaker, but I didn't talk about formulas. I talked about truth. I talked about the moment I found the VHS. The moment I stood in Vaughn's office and refused to back down. The moment I saw my mother's face in that lavender dream and knew I wasn't lost anymore. I was found. Because truth doesn't just set us free. It gives us purpose. After the event, a woman in her 60s approached me in tears. She'd been a junior researcher at Orinthia in '96. Fired for refusing to falsify trial data. She handed me a USB. Inside it? Original trial videos featuring Rebecca's early-stage EOS testing, with proof of results that had been suppressed. We submitted the data. A month later, Rebecca Bingham was posthumously inducted into the International Bioinnovation Hall of Fame. The press release read, "A brilliant mind ahead of her time, whose contributions paved the way for ethical, revolutionary innovation." I read the statement aloud at the lab's dedication ceremony, voice steady, heart full. "I only wish she could see this," I said. And then I looked up. At the giant screen projecting her face, her laugh, her lab coat in motion. And I realized. She could. She always had. Because I wasn't just her daughter. I was her echo. And now, the world could finally hear us both. People asked me later what I would have done if I'd never found the tape. Would I have launched the same brand? Would I still have built Bingham Botanicals? My answer? Maybe. But I wouldn't have built it with purpose. Because until that moment, I didn't know who I was. Or more importantly, why I was. The secret my family kept wasn't just one of legacy or lies. It was a truth too bold for them to believe I could carry. But I did. And now? That truth belongs to everyone. Lillian Knox's final words in her memoir read, "My story began with a betrayal. But it ended with belief. Not just in my mother, but in myself. I used to think success was the goal. But legacy is the gift. And that gift was never meant to be kept hidden. It was meant to be shared."